Well, let's get started anyway. Uh, Most of you, of course, know Amy Kirkham, 3 to 6 Director of Training for SMTC. Amy, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me this afternoon and join the conversation. What's your Montessori story? How did you get started in Montessori?
My Montessori story. So I certainly heard about Maria Montessori when I was doing my original early childhood qualification back in the 80s. And I looked into doing Montessori training back then, but it wasn't really an option for me. I wasn't really able to travel either overseas or indeed to Sydney, which is where the AMI training was offered at the time. I did look at some of the other offerings available, but just because of who I am as a learner, I really was looking for face-to-face training. So back in the 80s, I revisited or reheard about Montessori again in the 90s when I trained as a teacher of the deaf, and so met Montessori in the context of Sagan, which was kind of quite interesting, and then eventually did my 3 to 6 training when AMI, the AMI course came to Melbourne in 93. So that's kind of where I started, I guess.
And what attracted you to Montessori when you first heard it?
I guess because it's just such a common sense approach. So really for me, all along, even before I trained, I really kind of felt Montessori is more mainstream than mainstream, right? So I think people always say, oh, Montessori, it's an alternative education. Actually, it's not. Montessori is such common sense. It's about looking at the child in front of you, and that there's nothing alternative about that, unless we start saying, actually, non-Montessori education chooses not to look at the child, which is why Montessori is considered to be alternative.
Yeah. So how long were you teaching before your Montessori training?
So I was working in the classroom with children for, I guess, 6 years, and I helped start up a centre as well before I began the Training of Trainers program. But then because when I did Training of Trainers, it wasn't a consecutive training experience because we were relying on overseas trainers to come over to run courses. That also was good for me because it allowed me to work back in the classroom in between training as well. And certainly up to pre-COVID times, I've tried as much as possible to get back into the classroom and actually be working with children. Yeah.
So what's been the thing that you've most loved about being a Montessori educator in your life?
I guess looking at the amazing discoveries that children have. Right. So, and it's not that I think children don't make discoveries in other situations, but I think perhaps the opportunity for children to make discoveries is facilitated and supported more in a Montessori environment. So things like 4-year-olds who made the discovery about skip counting and said to me, I know, Amy, why that we don't need to have chains, past this particular chain, because I know that if I can skip count in 8 and I just skip every second label, I can skip count in 16, and that's why we don't need a longer or short chain in 16s. Right? So it's those amazing discoveries that I go, yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing. And it's not that children can't make those discoveries elsewhere, but they perhaps don't have the materials or the opportunities to do that.
Yeah. Any big unforgettable moments that come to mind from your time with kids in the classroom?
No, lots of very fond memories of children. Lots of really lovely, again, connections which children have made, which I really feel privileged to have sometimes just overheard. So it's not even that they've shared them with me, but I've overheard them, or I've just been observing them, and I've seen these lovely connections happen.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What about challenges? What have been some of the most notable challenges of your time as a Montessori educator?
I guess for me, the biggest challenge, both when I was working in the classroom with children, but also now working with adults, is trying to help other people have faith in the child.
Mhm.
And so that would have been the case, with other educators as colleagues when I was working with children. Um, Educators, now when I send students out on placements, um, you know, schools when I go and do consultations, it's that I think lack of faith, right? So I hear, oh well, we can't really do this, and I kind of go, and I want to say, well, why? Why can't we do it? Right? It's actually you, the person telling me that we can't do it, that is putting up that obstacle, right? It's not because the child can't do it. The child can do many things if we provide opportunity and we have trust in them.
Mm. Does that work in turning people around?
Work in what way?
Does that help people see the ability, the capability of the child to ask the
Um,
question?
I don't know that it does, because I think it also relies on people being open
Yeah.
to that. And that's something which, really you can only work on yourself personally.
Yeah. True.
Mm.
Are there things that you've least loved about Montessori?
Um, Actually, no. I have to say, I really, really enjoyed working with the children in the classroom. I had no desire whatsoever to go into training. I really, I would have died happy just being with children in the classroom. Having said that, I've also really enjoyed and really appreciated a lot of the experiences and opportunities that I've had as a trainer. Um, and so for me, that the best of both worlds, um, is having that opportunity to not be training full time, which also then allows me to step back into the classroom and work with children.
Mm. Have you done that?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, up to COVID, I was probably working 50-50. So
Mm.
50% of the time with children, 50% of the time with adults.
Nice. It's a good way to keep you honest, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, I just kind of think, it's so much more meaningful
Yeah.
as well for me as a trainer, but also more meaningful for students. So when a student says, oh, but what about X, Y, and Z, I can say, well, actually, I did that this morning. I
Mm.
did that this morning in this particular environment in this room. Right. So yes, it does work. I can tell you it works. It also then meant that I was, I don't know if the word I'm looking for is fortunate or unfortunate, and certainly from the students' point of view, whether they thought they were lucky or not. But it also allowed me to also have students on placement.
Mm. Can you talk a bit about the process of becoming a trainer, what that
Mm,
involved, and
sure. So you have to have at least 5 years experience um, with children of that particular age group, and
mm,
certainly for 3 to 6 trainers, 3 of those has to be consecutive with the same group of children.
mm.
And so that really means that you've seen that full cycle. So you've seen your 3-year-old new child turn into the 4-year-old, turn into the 5-year-old, turn into the nearly 6-year-old before they move on.
So just
Um,
one cycle, really.
yeah, yeah. So that's a must. Um, there are 2 interviews that you go through, and there's also a classroom observation that happens as well.
Mm,
And then it's kind of like an apprenticeship system. So the first year, well, actually, I should backtrack and say when I did it, it was a little bit different to how it's run now. But when I went through the Training of Trainers program, the first year was a probationary year, and you essentially resit the course, right? So you resit the course, and it's such a valuable opportunity to sit there and hear all the lectures again, do all of the reading, see all the presentations through a different lens, right? Because you're now looking at it with the benefit of experience with children. And then with each subsequent training course, as you write theory papers, lectures, presentations, what is now called the training group. So that's a panel, if you like, of other trainers. Read that, they give you feedback, and then as things get approved by the training group, you then deliver it on a course. And so you have to do 2 courses with one trainer, and then you have to do another course with another trainer. So the trainers I worked under were Shannon Helfrich. So she came out and did 2 full-time courses in Sydney. And my other trainer that I worked with was Joan Bettman, and she came out and did a summer course in Sydney. So I'm super, super grateful to both of those women who also, took that leap as well and left, their home countries to come out to Australia to also offer training, so that Pamela Nunn and myself could also do the Training of Trainers program.
How many years did it take you altogether?
So I started in October 1999, and I became a trainer in 2006.
Wow. And was it full-time?
Well, yes and no. So 2 full-time courses with Shannon, and then the summer course with Joan was actually done over 3 summers. And as I said, in between, I did step back into the classroom as well.
So people who want to do the Trainer of Trainers program, they really have to be in a position to be able to support themselves for several years.
Yes and no. So there are various sponsorship opportunities. So there's the what's called the MM75 fund, which was established when Mario Montessori turned 75. So that's available for people training to be trainers. I was fortunate in that I didn't need to access any of that money, so I don't really know how it all works. I believe there are other funding opportunities as well now that are available. It doesn't actually cost you to do the Training of Trainers program per se, but you also don't get paid during it. So it's it doesn't cost you any money, but you also don't earn any money, if that makes sense. So I actually quite appreciate the opportunity to go back into the classroom, so that we could top up some of the family finances, so to speak, along the way.
And so once you graduate as a trainer, you're more or less a free agent sort of thing. You set up your own training programs. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So the trainers all have a contract with AMI. So we sign an agreement to say, for example, these are the lectures that are delivered. This is the course format, etc. The course schedule is submitted to AMI ahead of time. Some trainers certainly do have their own training centres, but most would actually work for an organisation.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Do you think that the way that the Trainer of Trainers program is set up, do you think that that limits the number of trainers that are available?
I think it does, and I think certainly AMI has addressed this since I went through the program. So there are more options now in terms of how you can train. And it is an arduous program, but I also think it needs to be. I think there's definite value in working with a range of other trainers, because it's about hearing the voices of many. And so, for most of the trainers who've been through the program, whether they did it when I did it or whether they've done it in one of its various forms now, you've come into contact with at least 3 separate trainers. So your original trainer, someone that you've done 2 courses with, and then a third person, right? And so I think that allows you to then really distill that information down and look at the principles, right? So it's not just my trainer said X, Y, and Z, right? And certainly, I'm also really appreciative that Pam Nunn went through the process at the same time as me, because, we would have a discussion as well, and we would sit there at the back going, what do you think about that? Would you do that? Would you change that? And because I also had the opportunity to go back into the classroom, it also allowed me to go, okay, so when I did the training originally, I might have presented this material this particular way. I've now seen another way that you can do it. I'm going to test that out with children, right? Does that fit comfortably with me? Does it still meet the principles? And so for me, that's a really a way of keeping it current, right? So it's not about saying, I'm slavishly going to do it this one way because that's how I was taught, right? And I think AMI training, the Training of Trainers program, plus the diploma courses themselves, I think there's a real emphasis on think for yourself, right? And I say to the students all the time, the incorrect answer always, right, is I'm doing this because Amy said so, right? That is always the wrong answer, right? And in fact, I have been known to say at workshops, if I hear that you're doing this because I said so or because you did it in a workshop, even though I might have said that, I will deny that. I will say, no, I did not say that, right? Because actually, I want people to do things because they understand them, right? You understand it, you believe in it, right? And it makes sense for you, right? It's a dangerous slope. It's a dangerous way to say, I'm doing this because my trainer said this, right? Or I'm doing this because my album says that, right? So I believe kind of the AMI approach is very much to say, think, right? Think it through, reflect. Don't do it because it's written down here, or don't do it because, whoever trained you said X, Y, and Z. And so that's why it has to, in my opinion, be a long process, right? Because it allows you that time to really kind of think it through and kind of go, well, okay, does this make sense? Would it work? Am I still following the principles?
So how much freedom do you have to change the program, to change the training if you decide otherwise than the retrainers that trained you?
Yeah. So there's a list of lectures and presentations that must be given on a course. Right. So that's a given. If you add additional things, that's totally up to you. And certainly for me here in Australia, things that I have added to the course would be things around the early years learning framework, right? Because again, at the end of the day, I go, well, people I'm training need to work in this context. Therefore, they do need to understand, how to write a quality improvement plan. What are the standards? What are the OH&S implications, right? And that would be the case for, I think, many other AMI programs in other countries, right? So there would be additional aspects added to that course, particular to a particular country, and the regulations and that the environment, I guess, that people are working in. Having said that, the AMI courses are also international diplomas, right? And so the exams are assessed, conducted by external examiners, right? And so you can't go too far off the beaten track, right? Because the external examiners are also looking for, does this student understand the child, right? Does this student understand the indirect preparation that might have happened before? Do they understand what the extensions are? Do they understand how to follow that child? You know, and again, from an AMI perspective, that really means that you have to do your own thinking, right? So it's not just a checklist. It's not about saying, oh, the child did this, therefore I will now always do this next presentation. Right? So it's not about following a linear progression, right? So I like to think of it as, you know, here's the child, and we can go this way, right? To extend them, we can go this way to represent things or to clarify things, and then we can also go up and down. So there's depth as well, right? And so again, I think, you know, it's about really helping students understand this is where the child is at, and there's no one way, right? There's always a gazillion options of which way you then go based on that individual child.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying about encouraging or you know, letting people know that they should never do something because Amy said so. Do you think, though, that there is sort of a cult of the trainer among AMI trainees?
I think historically there was. I think less so now, right? And I think AMI are really trying to get across the message that you do a course for the knowledge, right? So you're not picking a course for a particular trainer. And I think, you know, with the development of the Training of Trainers program, there is a lot more consistency.
I trained with the American Montessori Society in New York, and that training tradition, and AMS probably more generally, has multiple trainers who take parts of the training. And so I had probably, you know, up to, well, maybe 8 to 12 different trainers at different times, and they would sort of, you know, teach back to back during the day. And that really, I felt, sort of cut down on the possibility of, you know, there being a cult of the trainer in that training tradition. Do you think that perhaps it's that there's single trainers in AMI that encourages that kind of?
I don't think so. And certainly, increasingly, there are more faculties. So in addition to working here in Australia, I also work on the China faculty, where we do have, and again, I love working on the China faculty, right? So it's a very different experience. So here in Australia, you know, I have anywhere from 10 to 15 students, right? And it is absolutely me, myself, and I, right? So I'm doing everything. I'm, you know, buying the toilet paper. I'm doing the dishes. I'm, you know, sanding back the shelves or something if I need to, right? Versus in China, where I've got a team, right? And currently, I've just started a new course in Beijing with 85 students.
Wow!
Right? I have on that course 5 trainers of training, right? So 2 of them are in their second part, so it's the second course with me. 2 of them are doing the first course with me, and a third has actually trained with another group in another faculty of trainers in China, and is now coming to also experience training with me. With that group of 85, I'm also working with a couple of trainers from India, right? But other trainers that I've also worked very closely with in China include trainers from Norway, trainers from London, trainers from Finland, trainers from Mexico, right? And so the depth of discussion with that, I think, also really, you know, adds to all of that. And certainly, you know, if you think culturally, for a lot of students with an Asian background, I think it's been more helpful for them to hear the voices of many, because it forces them, whether they like it or not, to look at the principles.
Yeah. Well, you raise an interesting issue of the, you know, relative lack of penetration of Montessori into Australian education in general, and the fact that, you know, after 107 years or so, you know, we have still 0.5% of schools in Australia Montessori, and on my back of the napkin figures are about 0.012% children in Australia. Why do you think that is? Why is there so little Montessori here?
I don't know, but I suspect that a lot of it has to do with inconsistency, right? And so we hear the word Montessori, and I think Montessori is possibly one of, if not the only, approach where we hear both, oh, I would never send my child to a Montessori school. Those children are allowed to do whatever they like, right? All the way through to, oh, I would never send my child to a Montessori school. It's so structured and rigid, right? And to me, that says people out there who are offering Montessori programs have no idea what they're doing. And that does not help our cause, because when people who don't know, members of the general public, families who are looking for educational approaches for their children, they go out and observe. If they see one extreme or the other extreme, that then for them becomes, this is what Montessori is. Right? And so that doesn't help our cause at all. It doesn't help, I don't think, that certainly for a while there, and perhaps ongoing, Montessori was a bit of a marketing tool. Right? You only need to look at the huge number of childcare centres that have opened up recently with the word Montessori in them. Right? And when you know, perhaps dig a little bit, you know, under the surface, you discover, okay, so do they have anyone who is trained? No, right? Maybe they've got one educational leader who did a workshop once, who is now training all of the staff. Right? So how is that helping our cause? It's not. Another thing that perhaps I don't think is helping to grow Montessori is, again, this consistent message that the general community is getting, that Montessori is an alternative approach. Right? It's not an alternative approach. Montessori is common sense. Right? And Montessori, if you look at where she fits on the lineage, if you like, of early childhood education, she's right up there with Vygotsky, right? She's right up there with all of those mainstream people, right? She's actually not an alternative education. But the more we keep saying, oh, Montessori, it's an alternative, the more people are going to think, oh yeah, that's a bit odd. I'm not quite prepared to try that out on my child.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and so it's about changing the perception, right? And it's about saying to the general community, saying to families, Montessori is a common sense approach, right? Montessori is actually about respecting the child. Montessori is about developing a real love for learning, right? And who doesn't want that, right? Versus, oh, Montessori, we're going to be helping your child learn to read and write and do maths really early. Right, so we're sending out wrong messages, right? Which also then doesn't help with you know, government organisations like ASEQA.
So, what do you think is the answer to get the correct message out there? And what are schools and centres to do who are desperate for well-trained teachers and can't find them?
So I think definitely training's the answer, right? But I also think schools who cry poor, and I'm not saying that training's particularly affordable, because I actually don't think it is. I think we could make training a lot more affordable, right? But I also think schools that cry poor also need to decide, do I want to be a Montessori school or not? Right? And if you want to be a Montessori school, then actually the first thing you need to do is get the knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? You know, because it worries me. It really worries me when I hear, and I hear this a lot, right? Oh, we offer Montessori in the morning and play-based in the afternoon, right? And it makes me worried, and it makes me a bit alarmed, because I want to say Montessori is a play-based approach, right? And the more we hear communities out there, centres out there saying, oh, come to us, we have Montessori in the morning and we're going to help your child learn to, develop literacy skills and numeracy skills, and we offer a play-based program in the afternoon. Well, that's a completely skewed approach of what we are.
Mm.
Right? And if I heard that, I would be going, no, I don't want that for my child.
Yeah. What do you think are some ways that we can make training more affordable, more accessible?
Well, I think it's a numbers game, right? Running a course with 10 people is not as cost efficient as running a course with 20 people, right? Or 30 people. And as I say, my courses here in Australia are 10, 15 students, right? My courses overseas are in the 80s, right? And so I kind of go, okay, so what could I do here? I could run a course with 10 students, right, where those students are paying $14,000, I believe is the current going price, right? Or I could have 20 people do it for $7,000. And I would much rather that, right? Because actually that's more affordable, and that actually then means I've got twice the number of qualified people going out into the community who maybe, I'm not guaranteeing, but maybe have some sort of hope of actually doing what they need to do.
So is it chicken or the egg? Is it the training is not very affordable because there are so few numbers, or are there so few numbers because it's not affordable?
Well, I think it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think is the answer to getting more numbers and making it more affordable, both at the same time?
Yeah, well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it, Mark? Right? All over the world, people are struggling to find students. And perhaps training centres which are able to attract more students are training centres where students are being sponsored. Right, so my 85 students in Beijing, most of them are being sponsored by their schools.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's about, I think it's about schools stepping up and saying, if we actually want to run a Montessori program, step one is to have Montessori trained people.
Yeah. You mentioned the importance of consistency. Are there places in the world where there are many different training traditions and perhaps some inconsistencies where Montessori has greater penetration among the education system, like the United States or?
Yeah. Again, I don't know. Perhaps the United States would be a good example because there are a number of larger training organisations over there. Does that make them any more consistent or less consistent? I don't know. I haven't actually, been out to see many programs.
So
it isn't easy to find staff though. I'm in Thailand, by the way. My name's Stuart, and we've just opened a brand new Montessori school. We have an AMI. Sorry to interrupt you two guys,
but no, please.
And we've got an AMI registered teacher, but in the 0 to 3s we haven't. We're kind of at the moment making it up as we go along and trying our very, very best by, and we've got 2 Thai teaching assistants which are learning from the AMI teacher. Rather than getting a teacher or assistants that have done it before, we've got completely people that have never really been involved in schools before, not necessarily not been around children, but they really have taken on board. And as I heard earlier, a lot of Montessori is common sense. It's really just bringing up children in a really nice, organized way. And but we have struggled. I'm actually, if my 2 Thai staff turn out to be great, 6 months from now, I'll send them on a course to be for the AMI teaching assistant course up in the north of Thailand. But I need to know that they're going to stay with me before I start spending 30,000 baht each person to make sure they can go and learn what we need them to know. But there is definitely a problem in finding good staff, or finding any
staff. Yeah.
Any staff. I have one, and she was fresh out of the AMI course, so she was green behind the ears in starting, which has not been easy, for her or for me or for the school. But she's very quickly learning that what's in the book isn't, it doesn't, it's everything is not all flowery and wonderful like they imagine when you're at school. The reality is somewhat different, especially with my school here in Phuket, where we are in a holiday island that has filled up with Russians who want somewhere for their children to go to school. And we happen to be a brand new school, and many schools here are full. So we've managed to get 20 students, in the case of a month. So, you get, 20 students all of a sudden come from various different troubled backgrounds, a lot of them troubled background, war-torn areas of the world. And it's not been easy, but already in a month, you can tell that what we've been doing is definitely making progress. And you can see the children coming from being very boisterous to becoming quite calm children compared to what they were a month ago when they started. But we really are. I was told by somebody, and I'll never forget this, and she said to me, "How do you open a Montessori school?" And she said, "Put up a sign." And that's what we did. But we are a Montessori school. We just don't have a full set of Montessori staff. We are doing our best by being involved in all these meetings, by watching as much information from the internet. But, if there isn't the staff available, we really do just have to, work with what we've got.
That's a great point, Stuart. Thank you. Amy, that brings up another interesting question. Do you think AMI training really prepares teachers for the modern world?
I think it does, but I also think it depends on the AMI trainer.
Yeah.
Right. So as I said, so AMI trainers are required by AMI to deliver a set group of lectures and presentations. Right. You can choose to add more, and as I said, I choose to add more because I'm very mindful that my graduates are going out to work in the Australian context.
Yeah.
Right.
Are there any areas where you think Montessori needs to be updated to really better fit the modern world, the way children have changed?
No, I actually don't. I don't think it does. What perhaps is lacking in an AMI Montessori diploma is the other regulatory things that you need to know, right? And in a sense, we don't tend to offer that because you can get that elsewhere, right? And it's already a very involved course, which requires a lot of commitment, right? So if we were to say, we're going to turn you out so that you can walk straight into a classroom and, be a registered teacher as well, right? We would need to offer more, right? An AMI course is equivalent to, right, 9 months full time, right? And we're all dreaming if we think 9 months of training is going to equip you to walk into a classroom. It's not, right? Teacher training courses take 4 years, right? So we are totally dreaming if we think, oh, do an AMI diploma and you're right to go. You're not right to go, right? And you will never be right to go because we can't. If we were going to guarantee that you were ready to step right in, then we would actually have to make our course 4 years.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think that...
That's exactly what I found out. Sorry, that's exactly what I found out. We took somebody that was fresh from an AMI course, and she did a lot of it online over COVID. So the the lack of classroom attendance
Mm-hmm.
and classroom observation was somewhat limited, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking my teacher because she's doing a grand job. In the very beginning, I was worried and thought it was just going to be a disaster. Let's get a normal teacher. She'll do a better job. But she's really come into her own, you know, and growing stronger now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, and
you know,
how much mentoring is built into the AMI training?
You know, again, I think it varies from trainer to trainer. My students know that they can email me anytime, right? So any graduate can email me anytime and they're guaranteed for an answer. Certainly my Melbourne students know that I will also come and see them, right? It's trickier for my students in China. It's also trickier for groups that I've done interstate, just because I don't live there. But certainly for me, I am very mindful that, you know, you can't just say, come and do a course and you're right to go. So there's ongoing contact with graduates.
Yeah,
I
surely
think that
you know, that mentor, that in-person on the job training in the classroom is the most important part of any training.
Yeah, very much so. You know, and I think the you know, going back to Stuart's question, when schools have approached me, and lots of schools do, to say, oh, you know, have you got any graduates or any current students who are looking for jobs? 9 times out of 10, my response is, look at your own staff, right? Find a staff member who you know already works well in your school and sponsor them to do the training. Right? That's actually what schools need to do, right? So then that solves that whole, now I've got someone fresh out of training who doesn't know how to do anything else and I'm not sure if they'll fit in and what they know, right? Pick from the staff, pick from your staff, right? Look at the staff, say, okay, this person has all of the lovely, you know, attitudes, you know, respect for children, willingness and openness to learn. I'm happy to sponsor them to do that, right? You know, I'm also very, very mindful that, you know, a lot of childcare centres can't take the risk to sponsor staff, right? Because what is the guarantee that that staff member is going to stay? There's already such a huge turnover.
And there's even in Thailand, paying Thailand prices. Forget about Australia or Britain or Europe. I mean, you know, I think the cost of doing a teacher course for AMI in Thailand is about 140,000 baht. You know, a teacher salary here is, you know, 30, 40, 50,000, depending on where you are and what they're going to do for you. So if both of my Thai assistants have both got a bachelor's degree, so they're not stupid. They could easily go up and be an AMI teacher, easily, both of them. Even right now, I would feel confident enough that both of them are going to stay with me. But whether I'm prepared to risk 140,000 baht on and have to replace them while they're doing all the training, you know, when you've got a small school, and often these Montessori schools are only small with only 40, you know, we're only going to have a maximum of 40 students. How do you pay for this? You know?
Well, I think, you know, one of the issues that we hear, certainly in mainstream education, but also in Montessori, is teacher burnout and this big divergence between expectations that teachers come out of training with and then what the reality of what they find in the classroom. Do you think that changes in family life and technology and nutrition, for example, over the last 50 years or more has created changes in children and a difference between what's in the books and what actually happens in the classroom?
And again, you know, that for me is a very common thing I hear, which I actually have to say I find a little bit frustrating, right? So I'll hear, you know, principals, administrators, whoever, educators working in the field who say, oh yes, but you know, the reality is, and I want to say to them, at the moment that might be your reality, right? But it is not the reality, right? And I have to also say, because I make it a point to go back into the classroom and work, that I go, it does work, but you have to have faith in it, right? Once you start messing with the system, if you like, then you keep making more and more and more and more and more adaptations, right? So the language program, for example, is perfection, right? And if you follow the Montessori language program, it works. But we don't have faith in that. And so I go out to see schools, and I look at their language shelves and I see readers, and I say, well, why do you have these? Oh, well, parents expect. Well, parents don't know, right? Actually, it's your job to advocate for the child. Actually, it's your job to make learning joyful and fun, not follow some other system, right? And because you've sucked the joy out of learning to read and write, right? Children then are not getting the results, and then we panic more, and then we say, oh, we all have to sit down on a Monday afternoon and practice writing. We have to send these worksheets home. And then I go, well, what are you doing? You're not even, not only are you not offering Montessori, you're actually also offering really poor early childhood practice, right? Which also then makes me go, it is no surprise for me when a seeker goes out and goes, what's Montessori doing? Because I would totally agree with them. I would say, no, Montessori is not child-centered. Montessori is not developmentally appropriate. Montessori is not play-based. Why? Because we're making it that, right? Because we panic and we think, oh, the parents want this, the parents want that, and I say to students, I say to teachers all the time, hopefully people are not choosing Montessori, right, because they want their child to experience what they experienced. Right? Hopefully you're choosing Montessori because there's a little bit of you that understands there's a better way of doing this. There's a more respectful way of doing this. There is a way that we can do this which makes learning more fun and engaging. Right?
Do you not think that there's a lot of parents that are putting children into Montessori schools purely because they feel their children are not fitting into the mainstream system?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so there's a mixture of families who are under the misunderstanding that Montessori will give their child a leg up, right? Mm-hmm. There's a misunderstanding of Montessori as alternative, and so because my child's a little bit quirky and didn't quite fit in to all of these other schools, I'll send them to Montessori, right? So you've now got 2/3 of your group which are not quite doing, not quite there for the right reasons and don't quite understand why they're doing it, right? Which also then means you put the educator under stress because she or he now has a majority of families that don't understand, right? And unless that person is a really strong person and can stand up for the child, they're not doing Montessori.
Do you think that there are more children, particularly since COVID, but perhaps more in the last 10, 20 years, coming into Montessori centres and schools with what Montessori called deviations? And
Absolutely.
if so, what do we do?
Yeah.
Is the way to handle deviations to just help them to focus and concentrate? Mm-hmm. And those deviations will take care of themselves? Or do you think we need more than that?
So Montessori always said that the cure for deviation is work, right? And work means intrinsically motivating, self-chosen, enjoyable activity, right? And unfortunately, as I say, Montessori educators or educators who call themselves Montessori educators panic, right? And so they're inundated by children who have various deviations, and they don't go back to looking at the child, right? They panic and they go, oh my gosh, I've got all this pressure from administration, I've got all this pressure from the parents. This child has to learn how to write their name. And so what are we doing? We're saying to the children, no, you're not allowed to touch that. You're not allowed to touch this. You must sit down. You must write, right? We create those deviations, right? The child doesn't come with deviations, right? Deviations are caused by obstacles, and 9 times out of 10, it's the adult who puts that obstacle in the way of the child, and we can't see that, right? So many conversations I've had, with groups around the world in the last 3 years, right, is about saying, stop telling me about all the problems your children have. Right? The more we dwell on that, the more we're saying to parents, oh, your child did this and your child did that, the more we're spiraling into this whole negative view of the child, right? Focus on the positive, right? Look at the child, right? Stop having your own agenda, because we're all going in with an agenda saying we have to do this and we have to do that, and the curriculum says this and the curriculum says that, and we're following a checklist.
That's a great point. Strengths, focusing on strengths, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to open it up. Does anybody who's listening have questions or comments they'd like to make? Thanks, Stuart, for yours. Is there anybody?
Yeah, I'll shut up now.
No, that's all good. Jump in anytime.
Can I just share what a recent student, may I share what a recent student said to me? Of course, I'm a little bit biased because, you know, I am an AMI trainer, but one of my students said of a course from 4 years ago, she said, I thank my lucky stars for my AMI training because its depth gives me the confidence to constantly, when I'm faced with, you know, a day that's gone completely awry, when I'm faced with parents that, you know, want me to do this and this, I come back to those principles. And just as Amy was saying, I look at this child and I have that confidence because of the depth that I viewed Montessori principles in my training. I really feel sorry for students or for people that are trying to work in a Montessori context without, you know, a really strong foundation. They're really having a tough time and it's not fair on them. Thank you, Amy.
No,
thank you. Thank you, Stuart, for your feedback as well. That's interesting.
Thanks, Amy.
I mean, I visited a Montessori school just recently, and with also watching so much on the YouTube videos, and I look at the classrooms, and everything seems so calm, and everybody's just, it's almost like the children have been selected to, you know, to be in this position. Or these schools have been going for such a long time that they've gone from, you know, from 2 years old to 3 years old to 4 years old, and then you've got this beautiful, calm environment and the reality for these AMI trained teachers that come out is far from reality if you are going into a brand new school, you know. The school I visited just recently, it was on a Sunday, so there was no children there, but they made it out very clearly that it was just everything was calm, you know, and ours is somewhat different because we're so new, you know, and battling with language, you know. We're kind of offering a service almost at the moment.
Sure. And I guess the thing to remember, Stuart, is that would be the same whether you were offering a Montessori program, a Steiner program, or any other philosophy, right? Because you're stacking it against, I mean, I understand why you have to do that, but you're stacking it against the educator in a sense, right? Because you've got a whole group of children.
I've got to a point now where ideally, you really want to start with the 0s to 3s and have as many of them as you can, and almost have a school full of 0 to 3s, because none of them talk almost or speak very little, and it's much the process would work better where you get them to go through the ranks almost, rather than getting a 5-year-old to take a place in the school who's never been to Montessori's before. You're flogging a dead horse, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? But at the moment, you know, when you're a brand new school and the AMI teacher wants paying, and along with everybody else, you have to sort of go against your what you think is right just to make the whole thing work. But already I've come to the conclusion that I'm now not letting anybody between 3 and 6 into the school, because I have 10 of them and that is enough. It's only the smaller ones I want now, even if it means having another teacher.
Yeah. You know, and going back to kind of some of those earlier comments around, you know, staff retention, it's really unfair to say to any staff member who's trained in any philosophy, I'm going to put you in a room now with 20 brand new people of different age groups who are not familiar with anything. Right? It's actually not going to work. And so again, it's about centres also saying, you know what, we're going to start small. It's not about saying I'm going to open 20 centres right now and then go, oh, it doesn't work.
Are we going to be able to scale up Montessori though if we just restrict it to only taking students from 0 or 3 or wherever the school starts?
I actually think we can. Right? Because for me, it's about saying, get more qualified teachers out there, get more environments that actually work because they follow the Montessori principles, right? Which also then prevents teacher burnout, right? Actually encourages other people to go, yeah, this is a great place to work. I want to work here. I want that training versus, oh my gosh, you know, between Monday to Friday, I see 60 different children. You know, 2 children come 2 mornings, 2 children come this other time. You know, families have a choice to choose the Montessori program or the play-based program. And so they take their bets. And so, you know, some families come to me for 2 days a week and some families go to the room next door for the play-based program 2 days a week. And you go, what are you doing? It's just never going to work, right? And then I've got, you know, centre owners and administrators, you know, flooding my email box with, oh, you know, you're doing a course, how many, you know, and I think, well, you know, can I in all conscience say to one of my students or one of my graduates, can I pass the details of this person who's looking for a staff member? When I know actually it's going to be a pretty hellish place to work, right? Am I going to recommend that? Actually, no, right? I don't want to do that, you know? So when my graduates or my students go, you know, oh, I'm looking for a job, I go, yeah, and I want to find you somewhere great, which is going to be supportive, right? Where you're going to be mentored, right? And you're not going to be put in a position where it's a sink or swim situation where you're going to have to make compromises, which you don't particularly want to make. And before you know it, so many compromises have been made, you've lost your way.
Stuart, what
on the other hand, what's
is
happened to me opening a new school is if we want new schools to open, whether it's in Thailand or Australia, you start with 0 students, you know. I opened my school with 6 children and within the first month I've got 20. Yeah. So from a business point of view, we've done pretty well. But from a school point of view, because I've always said from the beginning, my number 1 priority here is building a strong, solid school. The money can come later. Earning a living can come later, but actually wanting to make a solid foundation of the school. And I think if AMI, if Montessori wants to grow bigger than what it is at the moment, there needs to be a way of opening new schools, because you know you can't have every single student being 0 to 3 or 0 to 2, you know. Because that's the ideal situation. You know, if you want to open a new school, and most of it's all privately funded, none of it's funded by the government. You know, it's certainly not here. And you know, you need to have enough of them to pay your teachers.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to take me 5 years. It's going to take me 5 years to fill the school.
But
just
it might need
Sarah
to take
Jane
that long.
a chance, because you had something to say earlier.
I was just going to say, which could help absolutely everyone, including Stuart, is I look at graduates that have just finished their master's or their Bachelor of Education, you know, when they're on placements. So I do 4th year placements. We do a lot, and I heavily mentor them. So that's a really great way of screening. I work with the faculty heads that deal with placements at universities. Some of them are overseas, so it's not just Australia-based. So they have there's a rigor there that I just say, look, we're a Montessori school, explain what the criteria is and what the student would be coming to. So they tend to hand select and recommend a Montessori placement. It's not necessarily with us, but with another Montessori school. And I've had quite a good success rate with that, Stuart. I've then kind of offered them a assistance job, and they've taken that up. And then while they're there, I then talk to them merrily about courses. And as a result, I've got 3 teachers now teaching who have done their courses, and they've done them over the holiday period, Christmas, or via correspondence. But the other thing is, Stuart, financially, another consideration would be doing a bond. So within their contract, you sending them off to the course, you're covering that course cost, you work out on a per yearly rate what the course cost is. Normally it roughly works out to about 3 years, so they're bonded to you for 3 years. If they leave prior to that, they've got to pay a proportion of that cost of that course back if they resign and leave. Once after 3 years, they're free to leave at no financial cost. And that's sometimes hard, but my philosophy on that is, well, for the greater good of the Montessori community, I've helped someone on their journey for those 3 years, they've trained, and if they go to another school, that's only a good thing.
Yeah.
So that's a way of scaffolding around you and your business modelling and retaining your staff for those 3 years, Stuart, while you're building.
Yeah. And I think, Sarah Jane, but it's also about supporting the staff through the training as well.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Because I think, if you found, the right person to support through training, the bond or no bond, right, you actually do want them to stay. Because you're making more than a financial investment in them, right? And I think going back to kind of Stuart's earlier thing of start small, you kind of have to start small, right? So the centres that I have worked with, and I've worked with two different centres here in Melbourne now, where they began small, right? Because the other thing to know is that you have to begin the way you intend to continue. Right. So if you start with a group of 20 children of mixed age group, you're fighting a losing battle, right? Because your older children who are being the role models are not necessarily being the role models that you want. Right? So you need to grow. You need to grow from those 3-year-olds, and those 3-year-olds have to eventually become your 5-year-olds. Right? Because then it does work. It's a rewarding experience for everyone. Everyone goes, yes, I can see how this works. Right. And so it's about re-educating the administrators. It's about re-educating, the general community as well, and sometimes schools say to me, oh, but what about if a family didn't hear about Montessori? It seems such a shame that we can't take them as a 6-year-old. Well, yes, and it does seem a shame, right? But are we actually meeting the needs of that child if we're taking them in as a 6-year-old? Because they've missed all of that earlier foundation. And what are we doing? We're taking them as a 6-year-old and we're educating them along traditional methods because that's what the child already knows. So are we actually helping that child and that family? Actually, we're not. No. We're not. Right? So why are we doing that?
It's probably a good place to draw to a close. So, Amy, thank you so much. This was so fascinating chatting with you for the last hour. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Nice to see you.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you. Good luck, Stuart.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks, Amy.
Bye.
Bye.